Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 108. Hey Junkies, how are you doing? My name is Peter, and thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Now, if you like these little interviews and don't want to miss any future episodes, just head over to the subscription page on the website, junkiepodcast.com/subscribe, for a step-by-step walkthrough on how to subscribe and automatically receive the latest episode directly on your computer or your mobile device. The show is also on Spotify, so if that's your preferred medium, just search for Endurance Junkie Podcast in the search bar and you will find me no problem. Also, feel free to join me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter if you want to discuss or leave your comments. My handle is Junkie Podcast on all platforms, so it should be nice and easy for us to connect. Alright, Dave Jones is an unlikely endurance athlete who didn't start running until his late 30s. Now, Dave has had quite a spectacular 2017, traveling the world and the United States to set a Guinness World Record as the first man to ever complete a marathon in all 50 US states and on every continent, including the unofficial continent of Zealandia, all in less than 1 year. Oh, and Dave really hates to run. So hi Dave, thanks for coming on the show. Now, for those of us who don't know you, can you maybe start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your own background and how you got into running?
Sure. Hi, Peter and Endurance Junkie gang. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, my name's Dave Jones, and so I grew up certainly with an inauspicious athletic background. When I was a kid, I did a lot of running around in the woods with my brothers and swimming in the rivers and playing outside. So I was fairly active in that way. But as far as athletics is concerned, I always wanted to play football, American football, and I was undersized for being as slow as I was, and certainly too oversized to be one of the skill positions. So I was caught in the middle there, never very good at it. I did it until about the 10th grade. And at that point, I finally hit a growth spurt, so I kind of got big enough. I was lifting weights. I was about 6'2", 230, and I started throwing on the track team. I was a shot put and discus thrower because that was the only thing I could do on a track team, and watch the runners run and laugh at them. I gave up football because it required too much running, and that was the end of sports. So high school finished, and I didn't do anything athletic per se again until I was about 36 years old.
And what decided to pick it up again?
So whenever by the time I got to be that ripe old age of mid-30s, I looked around one day and realized I was 285 pounds. I had been heavily smoking for many years. At one point, I had a 2-pack-a-day cigarette habit for well over a decade. I was up at that level of smoking, and I tried to quit a bunch of times. I had my first child and realized I didn't want to pass that on to the next generation, so I had to get off of it. I tossed the cigarettes, but still couldn't quite kick the nicotine. I was taking it every way I could, snorting it, chewing it, dipping it, rubbing it, patch, gum, whatever, snooze, whatever I could come upon. The urge wouldn't go away, and I was just trying to stay away from those terrible cigarettes. Hell, I'd even go for a cigar. But in any case, I just couldn't get off of it. And so my background educationally, I have a master's degree in social work. So I was a clinical social worker, a mental health therapist for a period of time before I got in, completely shifted gears and went into another business. And So I decided to do a behavioral experiment of one on myself, made myself into the little mice in B.F. Skinner's box, and decided to shock myself out of the urge to use nicotine. So the idea was fairly simple. Every single time that the urge to use nicotine came into my mind, I would immediately, without delay, stand up from whatever I was doing and go torture myself. So there's lots of history in this world of self-flagellation for religious reasons and these kind of things. I didn't decide to break out a bullwhip and start pounding on myself. I did what I really saw as torture, which is running. I will say at this point in time in the interview, I hate to run, Peter. I always have. I don't know that that'll ever change. I've gotten a lot better at it. But so I tortured myself by taking off running. And so I would stand up, take off running, and ask myself repeatedly this question: do you still want it? Do you still want it? Do you still want it? And whenever the answer finally became, no, I don't, then I was allowed to turn around on my heel and walk back from whence I came and go back to work or home or dinner or whatever it was I was doing, sleep, and then I would do it. But if I didn't make it back to where I was going before the urge came again, bang, back out again in the opposite direction until the urge went away. About 3 weeks into that, the urges had finally and completely, and I can tell you to this day, 5 years later, never come back. It was very effective torture. And about 3 weeks in, I walked in and said to my wife, if I am going to be running this much, I am going to run a marathon. And she just laughed at me again. I'm 285 pounds and I've been a lifelong cigarette smoker with no athletic background. And so she laughed, but she kind of knows me. So she didn't believe that it wasn't going to happen. She just was amused. And that day I ordered a book online, Jeff Galloway, and I started run walking myself to my first marathon 6 months later. Then 3 weeks after that, I did my second one. And about 2 weeks after that, I did my third one. And suddenly I was a marathon maniac. And it was on from there. I think I did 17, including a 100-mile effort that first year. And I'm still no wilting flower. I'm 240 pounds as I sit here and talk to you right now. But certainly I'm a little better body composition, and that's where it all started.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. You have a bit of an addictive personality there, because going from just one marathon and then just doing 17 and a 100-miler in your first year.
So, some junkies may call that addictive, and I'm not going to say that it's not. I like to look at it and frame it at least as being, yes, if I am, but it's not so much to the actual running itself, which is what most people would think that I would be addicted to, or the endorphins that come from it or such. Mm-hmm. And maybe I am. I'm not discounting that that's possible too. But what I really like is setting extremely hard goals and achieving them. And that is what I seem to be addicted to. And whenever I turn my inner therapist on myself, which is never a great idea, I tend to find that probably the gig is that I just love to set really hard goals, preposterous things that other people, including myself, think aren't possible, and then go out and do them.
Yeah. So I think after your first couple of marathons, that first extreme goal was an Ironman?
That's true. Again, the marathon was first, and then becoming a marathon maniac was next, and then advancing through the star levels of maniac kind of came off of that, and then do 100 miles, and that was in a 3-day race, so that was 72 hours that first January, so I don't know, 8 or 9 months after my first marathon, and then another 100 miles to try to do it in shorter time, and do the Boston Marathon, which I did in week 53 of that first year, and then I kind of got not bored with, but I'd accomplished what I needed to accomplish in that. And I had this notion that Ironman was the thing, and it was in the back of my head, and that was the hardest thing that you could possibly do. And it's, boy, there's nothing harder than doing an Ironman triathlon. And so I didn't want to say it out loud, because I knew as soon as I said it out loud, I was committed to it. Mm-hmm. And the day I said it out loud, I went ahead and registered for Ironman Wisconsin. At that time, I had never swam a lap in a pool. Again, I played with my brothers in the rivers and stuff when I was a kid, but had never learned freestyle or strokes or had a formal lesson. And I also hadn't owned a bike since a BMX whenever I was before I got my driver's license. So I kind of knew how to run, but I wasn't good at it, and I still didn't like it. And certainly the other sports I wasn't coming out of a big wealth of strength for those either. So, but yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah, but you did finish it, and you backed it up with Coeur d'Alene, I think, as well. And a pretty respectable time, 12:42, if I'm not mistaken. So that's you must have done some training there, no?
After the first one, whenever I had a near-death experience, I'll call it. There I was in Wisconsin at about mile 18. I'd been puking every 2 miles for the entire run. As soon as I got off the bike, I threw up. And then I could not hold anything down. Bowels had stopped. Everything had stopped accepting food and nutrition and all of it. I could not put anything or keep anything down, including hydration. And I was sick. And I just would get progressively more sick, puke, then go back to just a little sick, and then get more progressively sick, and do that on 2 mile increments throughout the whole thing. That was really good. And then a combination of that plus the heaving and hoeing, plus the physical activity, plus I'm sure dehydration at that point, all added up that about mile 18, I started having some sort of arrhythmia in my heart. I don't know how to explain it, but if your heart is on a rhythm for your whole life, and then all of a sudden it does something different that it's never done before, and it starts to and clunking out on you, you start going, now this one's new, and sure enough, I had to make the decision. All right, are you going to quit, or are you going to die? And right then and there, I made the decision that I was willing to die for that, and continued to move one foot in front of the other. And I did not die, I'm happy to report. And the arrhythmia popped itself back out, and I think another gear kicked in that I've used since. And so then after that race, I had back surgery 3 weeks later. I had 9-hour back surgery. A disc had exploded inward, and they had to cut into my spine with a saw and all kinds of good stuff like that. While I was recovering from that surgery, still hopped up on pain pills, I'm sure, I signed up for Ironman Coeur d'Alene, and then went ahead and hired a genuinely good coach and pursued and knocked 2 hours off of my previous performance and got a 12:40 something, which was where I wanted to be, and finished that last 10K running, and felt like when I finished in the daylight that I had accomplished what I needed to with Ironman.
No, that's good. So out of the 3 sports, which one do you hate most? Is it still the running?
Oh, it's still the running. Yeah. I don't like the boredom of a swimming pool, but open water swim I think is cool. Like, again, I'm built to go out there and do a mass start and do all the fighting with all those people. No, before you start yelling at me, all you people out there who hate those people, I am not the guy grabbing your ankles or pushing on your head or swimming over top of you, at least not intentionally. But most certainly when somebody thinks they are that person and they come up on me, they wish they hadn't. And so I have a good time with all of that stuff, and got my swim down to 117. So I felt all right about that. And cycling, I am more built for that. I have the big legs and the big muscle mass to at least pull my body around, and I can maintain pretty high wattage for a long time. So that I'm better at. That I think is the best of the 3, and the thing that I do the least. And then running I still hate to do.
Okay, well, so we'll continue on with the running anyway. And yeah,
Sure.
look back at last year because that was pretty epic. You ran 7 marathons on all 7 major continents in 7 days, and you backed that up with 50 marathons in all U.S. states, and all that within a 1-year period.
Sure enough.
First of all, why?
Well, it was progressive. It was an evolution, as is anything that I've done so far that we've talked about. So I did not expect when this year started out to do that. So I had done back-to-back marathons, like 2 marathons in 2 days before. But in December of 2016, I did my first quad. So Four Corners quad out where in the states where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico all meet together in one point. They've got the Navajo or Diné tribe has a monument there, and they host a race in December in the high desert. It's about 5,200 feet elevation, give or take, with the mountains and such on the trails. But every day it starts at the monument, it ends at the monument, but you can pick up 4 states in 4 days with four trail races, Colorado being by far the most difficult of those. So I made it through that, and that set me up for the 7. So the 7 was January 25th through the 31st of 2017. Back in 2015, a group of about 35 people attempted to go out and run verifiable public marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. And that differs a little bit from, say, World Marathon Challenge, which is out there and many people have heard of, and I'm not knocking them one way or the other, whether they knock me or not. But they don't necessarily fly on commercial airlines. They certainly don't go to publicly announced, publicly available marathons, show up with a crowd of people who are not there for the 7, start at a starting time, finish within the cutoff, get a medal hung around your neck, then go to the airport and fly to the next continent and do it again the next day and the next day and the next day. So that's kind of the distinction with that had never been done before. And so we went out to attempt this again. There was a group of 6 of us full marathoners and 2 half marathoners who all went out and coordinated travel together. Under the guidance of a guy by the name of Steve Hibbs with Marathon Adventures. And he also owns the White Continent Marathon race and the Punta Arenas Marathon and the Southern Cross Marathon. So it helps that the last 2 races of the series he owns, and then the others are not. But we started in Perth, Australia on the 25th. It was 103 degrees Fahrenheit, or I think that's 39 degrees C. Mm-hmm. And there was the Australia Day Marathon. It was not well attended, though it was public and well announced and on their holiday. It was not well attended because it was so blessed freaking hot.
Yeah, the Australians they know it's hot, so they do other things. They go to the pool and to the beach.
My goodness, it was terrible. This was right along the Swan River, and it was an out and back course with vats of water at either end. So about 5K in between water stops and only water. No Gatorade, no electrolytes, no nutrition, no nothing, just vats of water. And the one on the far end sat out in the sun. And so it became, I don't know if you guys remember sweet or sun tea from back in the 80s, but basically you would put your tea into a jar and stick it outside in the sun and it would naturally heat and do its thing. And it's just shy of boiling. That was the effect here. So I actually had to blow on my water in my handheld just to blow the steam off to be able to get a sip during this 103-degree marathon. Boy, that's the way to start your week if you know what's ahead. And then the next day was Singapore beach marathon, followed by the Marathon Cairo in Cairo, Egypt. And what an experience that was. I was 12 hours from wheels down to wheels up in Egypt. So 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. That is the entire time I spent in the nation of Egypt. That includes customs and immigration and all that both ways, and traveling across town and dressing and running a marathon and the whole nine. And then run that one out in the streets of Cairo. So they don't really have sidewalks to speak of. They certainly don't have traffic controls or cops or volunteers or people guiding traffic for you. If there's a road crossing, you run across and you use the force. You just stick your hand out and hope that the cars will stop, and you run in front of them and hope for the best. And so I saw multiple car accidents during the course of the thing, but I also got to see a little rain shower and a rainbow over the Nile River. Now, tell me somebody else who's seen a rainbow over the Nile River who doesn't live in Egypt. It was really something. I did not, however, see a Sphinx or the pyramids. That didn't happen. And then got back on a plane, flew to Amsterdam for Sri Chimnoy Marathon the next morning. Then back over to New York, landed in JFK of all nights, the night of the travel ban. If you all remember the first week of Trump's presidency, he put out the travel ban. Well, there was big riots and CNN and machine guns and all of it happening at JFK Airport when I came back to the United States after having been gone for a little over a week. I left the day he was inaugurated. Yes, I am someone who did leave the country the day that Trump was inaugurated, and I landed back into the travel ban. Ran a race in Long Island, the presidential inauguration marathon of all things, and then down to Punta Arenas the next day for South America, and then on to Antarctica for the day 7.
Okay. So what was it like at JFK when you came back with a passport with an Egyptian stamp in it?
They didn't give me nearly as much of a hard time as you would think, but yeah, it's like, well, I swear I've been on this is my fifth continent in 5 days, including Singapore, which is a Muslim majority nation, and Egypt. But I'm on the up and up. Don't mind the beard; it'll be fine.
Yeah. And Amsterdam as well. So just look to the back for joints and stuff like that.
That's right. I was a target waiting to happen. But the good news, or part of the good news, is that I traveled with absolutely no checked in luggage through the entire. So everything that I needed or was going to have, needed or not, was carried on my back throughout the entire journey. So at least they didn't have bunches of stuff to unpack and deal with. So it was actually fairly smooth. I think they had bigger things to worry about than us that night. There was not a lot of scrutiny, but it was one heck of a thing. A lot of pink pussy hats and all the stuff was all going on there, and it was a wild experience to just land. I hadn't seen news in a week. I had no idea what was happening in my country. So for all I knew, the entire place was on fire like Watts riots of the 80s or something. But we landed, we handled it, we did a race and got back out of there very quickly.
Cool stuff. Just how did you feel when you got back from Antarctica? I mean, completely knackered, I imagine.
Certainly. I had taken a polar plunge as soon as I finished the marathon. I could think of nothing more appropriate to do than strip down to nothing but my running shorts and hop in the Antarctic Sea, as everyone in their down and their goggles looks on and watches this crazy big hairy American hop in there to warnings of leopard seals and such. And yeah, my body shut down pretty quickly. I was glad to have a layer of blubber to keep me from dying that day. I made it back home, got to my 23rd annual Super Bowl party that I'd been throwing with my college roommate, and did a polar plunge there in North Carolina with them too. It wasn't nearly as cold, and then I got to come home and take stock. And yeah, it took me the whole month of February pretty much to recover. I mean, could I have gone out and run another marathon? Of course. You can always do more than you think you can. Did I want to? Absolutely not. And let the body heal. Didn't run a mile, didn't run a step for the entire month of February.
Mm-hmm. So were you already playing in your head with the idea of doing those 50 marathons in 50 states, or did that come
absolutely
during 2017 as you started racing again?
So I already had on the schedule to do the pick up a state I had never done. I already had maybe 20 some marathons or different states, and so I did have the goal for a lifetime of doing a marathon in all 50 United States. That predated the continents and all that. But I expected I would pick those up slowly, as I had slowly by my standards, as I had been. And so I had South Carolina scheduled in March. And then I wanted to challenge myself. Though I'd done the 100-mile distance, it was in timed races. I had never done a 50-mile set distance race. So I signed up, or I had already signed up for the 50-miler at Land Between the Lakes in Kentucky, which is not too far away from where I live. And went out and did that. 11 hours and 33 minutes of climbing hills. There was snow on the ground. It was muddy. It was a tough experience, even with what I'd gone through. Don't ever fall into the trap of believing, oh, well, I've done that, so I can do anything, because a 50-mile race will certainly snap you back into the game pretty quickly. And finished that. And then started slowly picking up some more states through the spring while I was trying to get my apparel line going and figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up. I mean, my last day of my career in the mining industry, where I'd been an executive for 15 years, was January 31st, the day that I did Antarctica. So I no longer had a jobby job, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to make this work. And Eternal Endurance was my plan, but at that time I thought it was going to be an apparel line and be different than it has certainly turned out. And then I picked up those marathons. Then my wife was really kind of pushing me, and I didn't have a job, not a job that I had to show up at a desk every day. And my kids aren't getting any younger. They're 12, 8, and 4. At the time, I guess they were 11, 7, and 3. And we made the decision to sell my Harley Davidson motorcycle that had been sitting for 3 years while I'd been running, and trade it for a 1995 motorhome that we could take the Great American Road Trip. So just kind of decided, seize the opportunity while it's here, buy this motorhome, and load up the family. And we took off, and we went to New England, where I ran a few marathons, and my 7-year-old daughter accompanied me in her first half marathon, right after, on what was supposed to be her last day of the second grade. We skipped school and went up to run that half marathon with her in Vermont, and I finished the full. And then we went through New England, came back, and then headed west. And we went out through Wyoming. We totaled a motorhome in Wyoming, lived for 3 weeks in a tent. Then got another one with the insurance proceeds, went up through the upper Northwest, all the way down the West Coast, came back across, burned the transmission out in St. George, Utah, spent another 3 weeks living in and out of tents and traveling across in rental cars to get the most out of the remainder of our vacation. Then I sent the family home in one car to make it in time for school. I had to wait on the motorhome to be fixed, and then drove it myself across the Rockies and back home. Got home at the end of August. All right, now you've done that. Now what? And at that point, the idea occurred to me, I wonder how many more states. Well, I wanted to do 52 marathons in 52 weeks. That was the first thought. And then I thought, well, I wonder how many if anyone has ever done 50 marathons in 50 states and 7 marathons on 7 continents in 1 year, and I did a couple of days of research, I know the people who would know, and started comparing Venn diagrams and found that there was no one in the middle of those two groups. And definitively there was not. And then, can it be done? And I looked and checked all the races in all the states and compared this weekend to that weekend and found that I'd have to do nonsense like Shawnee, Illinois on a Saturday morning, drive to St. Louis, fly to Washington, D.C., fly to Boston, spend the night in a rental car in a parking lot on Cape Cod in Massachusetts and run one the next morning. Stuff like that would have to happen, but it could be done. And by the time I'd put that kind of work into it, and I didn't have the money to do it, but I had the credit, and I started scheduling flights and rental cars and rooms if I needed them, slept in minivans, slept in cars, slept in rental cars, slept in tents, drove 1,000-mile days, did all stuff like that, and busted them out throughout the fall, and did 32 marathons in 32 different states in about 4.5 months, but 2 of those were in from December 16th to January 18th. So most of it was in about a little over 3 months.
Yeah, cool. So how does it feel now to be the only person in the world to have done such a thing?
Well, that evidently wasn't good enough. So my college roommate and I are hanging out. No one would have ever called either one of us for being marathoners, but he decided that he'd do his first marathon in Hawaii if I was going to do all that. My wife decided to do her first half marathon in Hawaii if I was going to do all that. So there we are on the beach the day before the 50th state. I'm getting ready to celebrate. The documentary film crew is there. Everybody's, ready to celebrate this great accomplishment and world record. And my roommate, thanks be to him, started really ribbing me and giving me a hard time and saying, "Isn't there an 8th continent now? When's your year up?" And asking me these prompting questions. And I hadn't mentioned that back on February 17th, right after I got home while I was recovering from the 7 continents in 7 days, and becoming only the second person to have ever accomplished that feat, they announced an 8th continent. I don't know if you've heard of this thing, but Zealandia, they scientific consensus decided that there was a distinct continental shelf that only pops out of the Pacific as New Zealand and New Caledonia and a couple other specks in the Pacific Ocean, and that is its own continent. And so suddenly I didn't have all the continents, and he told me, "Well, you're in Hawaii. You've got a week left before your year is up. If there's a marathon in New Zealand between now and then, don't you think you might want to pick it up while you're this close?" And so I left my wife sitting in Hawaii. There are worse places to leave your wife stranded, but she really appreciates my nonsense. Left her stranded in Hawaii, hopped on a plane. Long story short, after I truly believed, I stepped over a cross laying on the beach, and God spoke to me and told me, "Yep, you got to go do it. I'm in too." So it was a great spiritual experience. I hopped on this plane. I fly over there to New Zealand. I run another blessed hot marathon in the middle of the Southern Hemisphere summer, hot and humid this time, and finished up the 8th continent. So I didn't get to celebrate the first record, the 7 continents in 50 states, for longer than 24 hours before I lost a whole day in transit across the date line, picked up New Zealand. Then I was all by myself to have my own celebration in New Zealand, and I did that. I had a broken foot by that time, so I couldn't even walk around to the bars or whatever. too well. I limped around and got myself a couple of beers and went back to the room and texted with my wife, and then got home. But no, all of it is extraordinary. And then as news outlets pick up the story, Runner's World picked it up yesterday, and so I get these little bursts of fame, which are kind of amusing too. So I try to take it all in stride.
Yeah, you should enjoy it. The next question then, what do you do after that? I mean, how more crazy can it be?
You don't run. You try to avoid running as much as possible. So I don't know. I from an athletic standpoint, I plan on running 8 marathons in 8 states in 8 days in June. And the reason I kind of got drawn into that is because a nearly 400-pound, 379-pound guy reached out to me by my website and told me he didn't have any money to speak of, but that he needed to make a change in his life, and he would really like any help that I could give him toward that end, and that he was taking my advice. He wanted to dream big and unlimit himself, and that he wanted to run a marathon. Could I help? And there's nothing like that kind of inspiration for a guy of that size to commit and reach out and think that I'm the person who can help him. So I took on that, his cause as a project. On my Eternal Endurance Facebook page, I am posting updates on a regular basis as to how James is doing. His name is James. Posted pictures of him to start and doing essentially a couch to marathon program with him that will take a little longer, I think, than it took me, because I didn't have that much weight to shed. He has me by a full 100 pounds to start. But we're doing that little by little and trying to develop consistency right now and such. But part of what my success or where it started was committing. Again, commit to Ironman Wisconsin when you don't own a bike and don't know how to swim a lap. Commit to a marathon whenever you're 285 pounds and it hurts to run to the end of the driveway. That was part of my success. So I'm moving that theory along, and asked him to commit to a race. So earlier this week, he committed to a half marathon in Maine in June. And so that is the beginning of an 8-day series with a race director that I know and am familiar with. So it's mainly marathons, and they've given me a discount code so that if anyone else wants to join in with James and try to accomplish big things in any of their races in 2018, they contact me, and I can give you a code to use for a discount, and hopefully I can use this experience to change some people's lives. So athletically, I'm going to do those 8 races in 8 days, starting with the race with James. And then I'm looking at maybe next January doing Across the Years, which is a 6-day foot race that takes place in Arizona. I'd like to get 300 to 400 miles in that time, and that's aggressive. For me, I've never done anything like that before. It scares me to death, and I still hate to run. So there's that. Aside from that, though, I am finishing up my book about running this country in this interesting year, and this country and this world in this interesting year, and all of the connections that have come from that. We're not nearly as divided as I think a lot of people would lead us to believe. And that's one of the lessons I've learned. But writing a book about that, finishing it up. A documentary film is coming out with me as the subject in late spring, and then I'm also doing professional speaking. So I have been booked in a number of places, everything from commencements to professional gatherings, to clubs, to of course business gatherings, churches. So I'm traveling around and trying to spread the message that you can be unlimited, that you do not have to be particularly athletically inclined. In fact, it's even more satisfying if you're not, that it really requires shedding your limits, not letting anyone, including yourself, tell you what you can or cannot do, or particularly what you can't do, and then doing the work that it takes to get yourself through and make yourself a better person through endurance sports.
Okay. Where can people go to if they want to find out more about all these things that you just mentioned?
Well, certainly eternalendurance.com, not to be confused with internal endurance, but eternalendurance.com, and then all of the social media that you could guess. So Facebook, Eternal Endurance, Twitter is Eternal Endurance without the E on the end. They really just do not like you to have more characters than, so without the E on the end, Instagram, Eternal Endurance, LinkedIn, I'm Dave Jones. So I can be found in all of those kind of places.
Did you have some sponsors or partners that helped you throughout this journey?
Certainly, Eternal Endurance, of course, is my company, and Hoisted did most of the heavy lifting. But Ultra shoes, Ultra running, Ultra footwear has been a big help. I am a member of the Ultra Team Red and proud to support that brand. Try being a guy of my size and running in any little thin shoes without a big wide foot box and some of that. So they have been integral in my success athletically, and then also in supporting me in that way. Maui Jim Sunglasses sent me a brand new pair of sunglasses when I broke mine right before I was headed off to Hawaii. I got to thank them. 2XU compression gear has certainly helped me to recover more quickly and keep me pulled together, which is no easy feat. Cliff Bar has helped with my nutrition along the way. So Rock Atoll, ATOLL, menswear and shorts. They have been helpful to me along the line and put me up whenever I was coming through Hong Kong on my way into Perth. So I gotta give a shout out to them. So nothing great happens without a lot of support, and most importantly, I have to say, my dear wife Kristen, who has watched our 12-year-old, 8-year-old, 4-year-old, has done all of this herself through this year while her husband goes and drops his big executive career, burns money with a blowtorch, flying all over the world, and being gone all the time. She has been the wind beneath my wings, as it were, and I couldn't have done it without her, my mother, and other people and their support.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely put the links up to those different sponsors on the show notes page. Unfortunately, I can't do that for your wife, but I can imagine that that you owe her a lot. So
I do indeed. The young lady who was quoted in a USA Today headline, the USA Today article, the headline of it says, "He's an idiot," says wife of man who plans to run 57 marathons in a year. So my dear supportive wife has gotten her own press out of this already, and she would just as soon stay as far away from it as possible.
Well, awesome. It was great talking to you, Dave. Much appreciated.
You too, Peter. Thank you.
Alright, Junkies, you've reached the end of yet another episode of the Endurance Junkie podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Dave Jones for coming on. Now, every listen means a lot to me, so if you like this interview and think someone else would too, feel free to share it on your own social media channels. That would be awesome and very much appreciated. Now, if you have suggestions for possible future guests, you can always shoot me an email. That's peter@junkiepodcast.com, and I'll try to make it happen. Alright, thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time. Cheers.